Hello, my name is Kaylin Adigalazuka, and I will be presenting to you my unit overview over my technology assistant project-based learning unit covering ecological disturbances in our national parks. So who is this designed for? This unit was designed for 10th grade biology students in mind, and it has several cross-curricular applications. So one of them is going to be history. We're talking a lot about national parks, and there's a lot of really rich history in our national park system as President Roosevelt created the law that kind of put those into place. Also economics, we're talking a lot about kind of what businesses do in response to things that happen in our environment. And then we're also going to be talking about public policy, so this would be a really good one to do with your government kids. Project overview, this is going to be about a 2-week project, give or take a couple of days. It's going to be about 10 to 13 days with 50-minute class periods. Students are going to be researching ecological disturbances that have happened in our national park history. So a good example of this would be the fire that just happened in the Smoky Mountain National Park. Students are then going to come up with their own ecological disturbance, and they're going to explain how that could affect the national park. Students are going to present their findings to a panel of park rangers, public policymakers, environmental scientists, and tourism activists. So standards, Tennessee has actually just rolled out a new set of science standards, and so they're based off of next generation science standards, and so those are where I pulled my science standards from. And they are going to be analyze mathematical and or computational representations of population data that support explanations of factors that affect population size and carrying capacities of populations within an ecosystem, examine a representative ecosystem, and based on interdependent relationships present, predict population size effects due to a given disturbance. And then the second standard is going to be analyze examples of ecological succession, identifying and explaining the order of events responsible for the formation of a new ecosystem in response to extreme fluctuations in environmental conditions or catastrophic events. So these two are just simply talking about what happens when there's an ecological disturbance, what happens before, what does it look like after, and what does it look like everywhere else in between. Driving questions, how does ecological stress or disturbances affect population and ecosystem in our national park systems? And how does this affect tourism, public policy, and the National Park Services? So day one, this is going to be introduction to the project and what an ecological disturbance is. And so the first thing that kids are going to do, they're going to grab a food web. We will have just talked about food webs. They're going to take a pencil and they're going to X out an animal or a creature on the food web, and then they're just going to tell me what they think would happen. We're then going to play the initial activity, which would be how wolves change rivers. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And then we're going to introduce ecological disturbances, fire, flood, invasive species, things like that. We're going to divide students up into groups. We're going to give them their different roles. We're going to have 3 different roles that students are going to have every single day. Their roles are going to change every single day. So one's going to be the manager. They're the person that keeps everyone on task. The second one is going to be the recorder. They're going to record all of the findings for the day. They're the ones that are going to record in the student log, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And then there's also going to be the reflector. The reflector is the one that says, how did we do today and what can we do better tomorrow? And then they're also going to be handed their rubric, showing them everything that they need to have at the end of their project. And then they're going to begin their initial research. So what students need to be successful? Their final project is going to be either a 10 to 12 minute video or a 10 to 12 minute presentation to present to the panel of experts. So their presentation or video has to include the following. They've got to have a history of ecological disturbances in a national park. So they have to have at least one natural one and at least one human one. Then they also need an explanation of how the disturbance affected the park ecologically and on a broader scale. And so what we mean by on a broader scale is how did it affect the tourism in the area? How did it affect public policy? Was there any effect on public policy? Was there any effect in the local businesses, et cetera, et cetera? And then they have to explain how the park returned itself to equilibrium. How long did it take? What did it do to get there? And then what the students are going to do is they're actually going to design their own disturbance. So they're going to create a new invasive species, or they're going to create a new human disturbance, or they're going to discover an unknown natural disaster. They can get as creative with this as they want to be, and they are going to make their own, and then they're going to make a population graph showing what exactly would happen if this ecological disturbance were to actually happen. And so the population graph has to have at least 10 species on it, and it has to go from a time frame from at least 1 year before the disturbance to 1 year after the disturbance. They have to explain how tourism, public policy, and ecology are going to be affected by the disturbance. And then they have to explain how the ecosystem could return itself back to equilibrium. And they have to explain what humans could do to expedite the process. So our initial activity is going to be a video called How Wolves Change Rivers. I think it was in the 1920s, wolves were run out of Yellowstone. And about 20 years ago, they ended up being reintroduced to Yellowstone, and it completely changed the dynamics of Yellowstone. Because they reintroduced wolves, a lot of the lower level herbivores were kind of reduced in population, allowing the vegetation to grow up a lot more, and where the vegetation grew up on riverbanks, the roots gave stability to the riverbanks, and it really stabilized the rivers and actually changed the direction that rivers were flowing in some parts of the park. And it's a really cool video showing kids how ecological disturbances can really affect the dynamics of a park. So day 2, we're going to talk about ecological succession. Ecological succession is it's a process that scientists have observed for years and years and years. Whenever there's a huge ecological disturbance, you typically follow a succession of events right after. It typically is the exact same every single time. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And so we're going to kind of talk about natural disasters that could completely wipe out an ecosystem. Lava flow, flood, fire, zombie apocalypse, things of that nature. And we're going to have a class discussion. What do you think the first thing that'll grow back would be? And then we're going to kind of show the classic infographic of ecological succession, and we're going to have kids watch a crash course with Hank Green over ecological succession. They're going to continue working on their initial research for their PBL. Oh no, I've done something. Okay, there we go. Day 3, we're going to talk about population graphs. So we're actually going to have kids look at a food web. We're going to X out an animal, and we're going to come up with a model collectively as a whole class based on our class discussion, and we are going to come up with basically with a population graph, and we're going to kind of lead kids to that discovery. Remainder of class, again, kids are going to continue with their research. Day 4, we're going to continue with population graphs. Kids are actually going to be working with a simulator, and they've got several different scenarios in which they're going to run this population simulator. They're going to have 3 different Excel spreadsheets, and they're going to be collecting data on these spreadsheets over the number of organisms in a population of each individual species. And then they've got to create their own population graph. We're going to kind of have a little bit of class discussion, and then they're going to continue to get into their groups. We're going to have a teacher check in with groups and make sure that they all have a national park selected and are finding their ecological disturbances. And then day 5, we're going to start talking about natural versus human disturbances. And so we're going to kind of compare and contrast. We're going to do a T-chart and some brain maps. And then the students are going to continue working on their research. They should have found a national park and have their disturbances at this point. Day 6 is going to be kind of a check-in day. We're going to have a quiz and a notebook check. And then we're going to also continue with our research project. This is where I really check in and I ask students, what can I do for you? Where can I give you the support that you need? What all do you need from me? And kind of give them feedback as to what they could be doing better, how we could really improve what we've got going so far. Day 7, we're going to talk about the power of human disturbances. This is probably my favorite day. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about I'm going to play this video of this guy. It's a project that he did on an island where albatross birds. It's where they have their mating season, and he has videos of these birds, and basically they die from eating all of this garbage that they find in the ocean. It's a very powerful video, and we're going to kind of talk about what is contributing to these population decreases, increases, things of that nature. And then we're going to kind of have a class-wide discussion over what companies have you seen doing something recently because of impacts from the environment. So the big one is Starbucks recently got rid of straws, and so how can we bring things like that into the science classroom? Continue to work on projects. Day 8, we're going to talk about keystone species and invasive species. We're going to have kids do a little bit of reading, and we're going to give them a choice over what they can kind of read. And then we're going to continue, obviously, working on their projects, check in. Days 9 and 10, we're going to have a practice day, a peer review day, and final chance for revisions. So the kids are going to get up and they're going to either play their video or they're going to practice their presentation. And we're going to have like a 2-minute peer review where their peers can give them feedback. They're going to have sentence starters. So it's, I liked that you did this. I did not. I think that you could have done this better. I think that this, if you make this change, it will make your presentation stronger, things like that. And then I'm going to sit down with a rubric, and I'm going to write in feedback as to what students can do to improve for the final presentation. Days 11 through 13, they're going to present to be present to panel, reflect, and self-assess. So we're going to give presentations or show final videos to panel. We're going to receive feedback from the panel, and then we're going to come together, whole class. We're going to discuss what went well and what could have been better, and then students are going to take self-assessment surveys. Assessments, final project, exit ticket, student self-assessment, quiz, check-in, teacher check-in, practice presentations, and peer evaluation, student group logs. So these are, I talked about the 3 different roles that kids have. And so what the student log is it's going to be a Google Doc that they're going to go in every day, and whoever is the recorder that day, they're going to record what student had what role for each day, what all they accomplished that day, what their research findings were, and then they're going to talk about their goals for the next day. So that's where they're going to keep all of that, and then class discussions and activities. And so here are all of my resources and instructional aids. So that is my PBL, and I really hope that you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.